Welcome to the show. Today's episode, we have Dr. Sandy, who's the founder and CEO of the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. She's a licensed clinical psychologist with over 30 years experience in mind-body medicine and positive psychology. She's even a certified senior fellow in Biofeedback. So today's episode is going to be great. Have you ever thought about making your own podcast? I'm sure you have great ideas, but you just don't know where to begin. Well, here's where Anchor is going to be a lifesaver. It's a one-stop shop for creating and distributing any podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor then quickly distributes your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so much more, just with one click. You can make money from your podcast right away with no minimum listenership. That means easy access to sponsors. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So why don't you check out Anchor today? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Kakativi Podcast, your source for all things health, happiness, and beauty. Dr. Sandy, while everyone who listens to the show has already heard about functional medicine, could you give us a brief explanation of what it is and why functional medicine is the healthcare of the future?
Functional medicine is really about addressing the root causes, what's wrong with you. So in the conventional world, you go to the doctor and they give you a name, a diagnosis. They'll label what the condition is. And then they'll say, what treatment? Should it be a pill? Should it be surgery? What's the procedure that is going to help you? Now, that absolutely has a place. If you think you're having a heart attack, you need to go to the emergency room. If you break your leg, you need to have medical treatment. And that works really well. And that's not a time to go to a functional medicine doctor to see a health coach. But what happens if you have a condition that's more chronic, something like type 2 diabetes, for example, and perhaps you also have rheumatoid arthritis and eczema, and you're depressed or anxious? Well, those conditions we don't do so well with acute medical care. It's not just one pill, or just naming that condition and then having a pill to take care of it. So we want to dig down to the root causes. And when we do that, we find that there's some commonalities, that those conditions might be driven by being in a constant inflammatory state. For example, well, what's causing that? Well, perhaps it's the lifestyle factors. So that would be typically turning your attention to what you're eating, moving throughout the day, what your sleep is like, are you properly hydrated, and very important, looking at meaning and purpose in your life. What are your relationships like? How are you handling all the pressures in daily life? So those are things that as you address those, that will then heal the root causes. And another way of looking at this, an analogy that I like to refer to, is to imagine that there's a room and there's a flood, there's water all over the floor, and the conventional doctors are trying to mop it up. That would be like trying to address the symptoms, but they don't look up from that work and see that somebody left the faucet on in the sink, and the sink is overflowing. So we turn off that faucet. That means we're stemming the tide. We're getting to the root cause. That's what functional medicine does.
I've had many functional medicine coaches on this show. Could you explain to everyone what the difference between a functional medicine doctor does and what a functional medicine coach would do, and why we need both?
functional medicine doctors went to medical school. They may be chiropractors. They have a license to practice. They are called practitioners. And so they are the ones who may be the medical detectives. They're going to look at somebody's lab results. They're going to recommend certain specialty labs that are going to really help that practitioner look into what those root causes are. They're going to come up with a plan, which may include the use of supplements, for example. So health coaches are not practitioners. Health coaches are people who help you change when change is hard. They take you from where you are to where you want to be. They inspire passion and purpose so that you're going to change. They are addressing what David Perlmutter in his new book, Brainwash, talks about as the decider within. That individual decides where they want to start. So a health coach is not a practitioner. If you see somebody as a health coach and they're calling themselves a practitioner, they are not following the scope of practice of a health coach. A health coach does not diagnose, they do not prescribe, they do not tell you what kind of foods or food plan you should be eating. And if they are doing so, then they are out of the scope of practice. Why is this important? Because health coaches, because they are not medical doctors, they are not dietitians, nutritionists, they did not get a graduate degree in those areas, and they may be missing those very rare conditions where again, you need a practitioner to intervene. But what's so powerful about a health coach who is in their scope of practice, because they have been trained, and at the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, we train people to ask the right questions, to listen to people, and we help them then understand that as a coach, it's by being a listener, by inspiring hope, and helping people stay accountable, helping people break down this change process into very tiny steps, asking questions like, well, where do you want to start? Are you okay with this plan that your doctor's given you? What works best? And as this cheerleader, being at your side, both when you have wins and when it gets hard and you want to quit. So that is the real advantage of being a coach, and coaching is really catching on. It's exploding, and so there's a lot of great research to showing that shows the power of working with a health coach.
You're passionate about group medical visits, and this is something I have never heard about. What exactly is it?
Well, we know that when you are isolated, then you may feel like it's only me. You feel alone out there. And when you are with a group of people, then the community is very powerful. And it's been said the community is the medicine. And this is how, people have traditionally gathered. I'm in a knitting group, and I love that. People are in book clubs, and traditionally there were sewing circles and there were gatherings, and people learned from one another. So this concept is now being applied to the medical world. And so let's say there's a doctor who has a lot of patients, and there's several ways this can be organized. One would be, well, we'll get people together who have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and they will meet. It can be in the waiting room. It could be after hours. And then the coach will be the facilitator. And that what happens is it's makes the change process so much easier because you're walking into that group and you may see somebody who is, oh, this is, I had difficulty making these changes, and now I started to change how I'm eating, and I'm doing much better. And so that new person in the group is going to say, if he can do it, I can do it too. They provide support for one another. And so it can be organized around a particular theme, or it can be more of an open-ended group. There are groups that come together, people with just chronic illness of all different sorts, and they find common ground and commonalities. And the really exciting factor is that these medical visits are, if coded appropriately, are oftentimes reimbursable through insurance. So this is something that we're very excited about, and we train our coaches in how to facilitate this. Often the doctor or nurse practitioner is there so that they can be part of that group for a portion of the time. Sometimes groups are run, and particularly if it's going to be billed through insurance, where people are taken out one at a time to get their vital signs checked, and then they go back into the group. This was something that when I was working as a psychologist, and one of the most rewarding parts of my work, this was several years ago before I founded Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, there was some oncologists who started to refer to me. And then one day I said, let's start a group. And so I would go into their office. My associate was with me at the time, and we facilitated together. That's often a winning formula, to not facilitate this on your own. So let's say two coaches can come in and lead that group. And that's what we did. And we met in the basement of this oncology office. It was where the staff kitchen was. They had a big table. We'd get in there. It was every Friday around noon. The first thing we did was around 1 o'clock, because we waited for the staff to finish their lunch. We would clear out all of the junk food, all the leftover pizzas and Chinese food that the drug reps had brought in. And then the people who were participating in the group would come in, and so many of them, they were an older audience, seniors or older participants, and they lived for that group. And they didn't want to leave. So this was an ongoing group. People came, people left. But they loved when a new person came in, because they said, oh, when I first started, I had a candy dish on my coffee table, and I would just nibble on that every evening while I was watching TV, and no more. And I feel so much better, and my doctor's so proud of me, and my blood sugar's down. And so they just loved the interaction. And they were so cute about it. There was often when they came in a little earlier, and some of the drug reps' food was still there, and we would have little conversations about it, and they would say, oh, that, I would never touch that now. And they understood why they wouldn't do that, and had a new appreciation for food as medicine. And so groups really, really powerful. Again, people get together and they form this very supportive community, and it's no longer I only, but it's we.
That sounds actually so great. Most of my audience, they have female hormonal imbalances like PCOS, endometriosis. So something like that I can see working for that community and lots of different communities. That's a great way that we can incorporate group healthcare.
Oh, it is so cool. And absolutely. So women have traditionally gotten together and gathered and talked and share ideas and recipes and childcare formulas, and supported one another in these circles. And the campfire, idea, or a sewing, knitting, quilting circles. And so often people will come and train to be health coaches, often because they have a struggle themselves. Like they suffered through PCOS, and now they learn coaching, they learn functional medicine principles. Then they go out and they organize these groups. And it doesn't even have to be face to face, it can be private Facebook groups where that community gets started. And I just love promoting this model.
You founded the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy at age 65. This is when most people are retiring. So tell us what led you to do that.
Well, I have a lot of energy and passion, and I love my work. And I had a meaning and purpose that I wanted to see people getting well and having true health care, and not that current model of sick care where people go to their doctors, they don't feel heard. And I knew that I had just studied functional medicine, and I had had a long career as a clinical psychologist, where I had been one of the trailblazers back in the late 70s, early 80s, early interest in mind body medicine and positive psychology and ways to change your thinking through cognitive behavior therapy. And so I had been an educator even way back before I was a psychologist. And so I love teaching, and I love teaching how we could integrate all of these principles that I had trained in and specialized in. And I knew work because I had seen so many patients over the years as a psychologist. So I felt like the time was right to establish a program, a school to train health coaches, and also have a sense that I still wanted to be vibrant and not retire. My friends were retiring, and they like to play canasta and mahjong and bridge, and I'm not a card player, so that's probably the main reason. I just have lots of energy and zest, but most importantly, I really felt that, and I still feel like every person that we train as a health coach is going to change the lives of so many others, and then they are going to go on. And this is what it continues to inspire me. Today, we had our virtual graduation. Because we're a virtual online school, but we get together, the graduating class, and one of the graduates shared a story that she'd had a personal health crisis herself, which is how she found functional medicine. And then it was actually her doctor who encouraged her, like, you'd be great at becoming a health coach, and talked about how her mom was overweight and had been making poor dietary choices her whole life. And she said that as she was studying with us and was listening to webinars and talks, and was that her mother started to like overhear some of this. And she said, well, I'm kind of interested. I'd like to learn more. And lo and behold, her mother then, nothing else, like lecturing the mom and nothing else had worked. And all of a sudden, her mom had decided to follow along, and is now on this weight loss journey and has been really successful and in transforming her health. So it has a ripple effect. So that's what it's life sustaining for me to, my heart is just filled with warmth and love for our community and how they are spreading health to friends, family, and clients.
With over 35 years as a clinical psychologist, I know you focus a little bit on positive psychology. Can you tell us exactly what positive psychology is and why you emphasize it when training coaches?
Well, positive psychology is really it's the scientific study of what's right with you, not what's wrong. So traditionally, the world of psychotherapy and psychology theories, it's all about identifying what's wrong, the diagnosis, and then what type of psychotherapy should we treat this person with. And this field of positive psychology addresses key questions like, how do we flourish? What does well-being really mean? What does a life well lived entail? And so it has to do with looking at things like, well, we need what we call PERMA, PERMA, and that's an acronym for the P is for positive emotions. So having genuine happiness, not happy because temporarily you get a new dress or a new pair of shoes, but it's really authentic happiness, where you have meaning, and meaning, purpose in your life. And how do we get there? Well, it's often by engagement. So the E stands for engagement, flow, being so involved in something that time just passes. You're so absorbed in it because you are so focused and in love with what you're doing. And then the R is relationships that are meaningful, and the M is meaning and purpose. And then finally, the A in PERMA is achievement, accomplishment. So doing something that you can say, yes, I did this. And so how do we get there? We get there through our strengths, our character strengths, and that's another key part. So we teach our coaches this positive psychology model, take a real deep dive, because that's how somebody that you're working with as a client, or you yourself, is going to have that well-being or the motivation to change. When you're thriving, you are using your strengths, not focusing on what's wrong with you.
You've written 2 books on using the functional medicine approach to stop panic attacks. Stop Panic Attacks in 10 Easy Steps, and How to Give Clients the Skills to Stop Panic Attacks. Could you give us some tips on how to stop an oncoming panic attack?
So the first thing is that often people will think that there's something really wrong. And again, this gets reinforced if they've been to a mental health professional or a psychiatrist, or people go to many medical specialists to get the diagnosis of panic attack. And often they're told they have a disorder. And they just, again, have this dismal picture like there's something wrong. And so it's often it starts with hope. One of the steps is to imagine yourself better and to understand that panic is really the body's intelligent way of dealing with what we're mistakenly thinking is real danger. So it's like a false alarm. If you have a school, and somebody a kid pulls the fire alarm, and now in the second you've got all of these emergency vehicles there, and so it's a false alarm. There's no real danger, and that's what's happening physiologically. The body thinks there's a real danger, and it's coming from our perception, our thoughts. So the first step is the sense of my body's acting intelligently, responding to somehow I scared myself. And you pair that with breathing. And there's often when we're in the middle of panic, we're either holding our breath, we're breathing in a very shallow way, or we're inhaling and not taking the time to fully exhale. So when you have a better rhythm to your breath, you slow it down. It's more of a belly breath. You're taking the time to fully exhale before you inhale again, then that will start to set in motion a relaxation effect, as opposed to this alarm going off, this stress response that's super heightened. So it's refusing to scare yourself and telling yourself that with practice you can get better and better. And I know this very well because I used to get pretty debilitating panic attacks when I was in my 20s. Why was this happening? Because I thought that I was dying. I thought that something was wrong with my heart. So that's where I would always go at the slightest twinge of some physiological sensation. Oh no, my chest feels tight. Oh no, I'm having trouble breathing. Oh, I have pains on my left arm. And so it was that, like, oh, I'm going to pass out, or I'm not feeling good. And that was the alarm. That was what was triggering the alarm. And once I learned and started practicing over and over again this relaxation response, what was happening was I had created new neural pathways for relaxation. So it got easier and easier. And now people say to me, oh, you're so calm, nothing bothers you.
As a certified senior fellow in biofeedback, could you tell us how a biofeedback treatment works, what kinds of conditions you've seen benefit the most from biofeedback.
Well, biofeedback simply means bio, which is the body, feedback is information back. So you're getting information back about your body. So I had been very involved in the field starting back in the late 70s. I was grandfathered in at that time into certification. There were just a handful of people in the country, really. And I recall the days in my office, and I had these giant wooden boxes. They had oscillating meters and dials, and so what were we doing? Well, we were helping people to see what's going on inside. It's a window to what's going on inside. So at a very simple level, you could call anything. You step on a scale. Well, that's biofeedback. You're getting information about your weight through the particular biofeedback machines we were using. The time we were measuring respiration. So let's say somebody was experiencing panic, and we would have these little belts, and we'd put one on their bellies and one across their chest. Then they would, when computers came into being and we had a screen now, then they would look at the screen and see, where's my breath coming from, and what does it look like? Is it all kind of jagged peaks, or is it smooth rolling hills, or like nice rolling waves? And then they could imagine drawing those on the screen. I love seeing how the field has advanced, because now these are apps on your phone, and we have there are things like Muse, there are things like Heart Math, Inner Balance, where you can just have these biofeedback devices on your phone. You practice at home. They're getting more and more commonplace, easy to use. And so you can have a coach guiding you through some relaxation. And so you understand by looking at that screen and getting that feedback, when I breathe this way, it changes my numbers, or the music will change tones on the machine. We did things like warming your hands. If you have migraine headaches, for example, you can imagine your hands warming, and there's whole protocols that have linked for years. So we had been doing that, where people with migraine headaches improve when they use hand warming techniques. Who knew that that's a connection? But there is. When your hands warm, it means that there's a relaxation response going on. We can measure sweat gland activity. We can measure muscle tension. And we can now, through a process called neurofeedback, measure brainwave activity. And even that process is all becoming something that consumers can, just by using Muse and some other apps that have been developed, and devices where it looks like a headband you're wearing, and then that connects with an app. And these are getting more and more commonplace and available, often Bluetooth driven.
Amazing. So you said warming of the hands is good for migraine headaches. What happens
Yes.
if your hands get really, really cold on demand? Is that the opposite?
So we have control, a fair degree of control, through our imagery, through breathing. And so if your hands get, the idea is that you want to have warmer hands, which means the blood vessels are dilating. I have a condition, it's called rainouts, which is where, when I go out in the cold, my hands actually turn white. And so I need to be very, very conscious of focusing, creating this stillness, and I will imagine the warmth coming back to my hands. And being patient, because it doesn't happen quickly. The body is often slower to respond, but knowing that as I sit quietly, then I can warm my hands.
Great tip, because I definitely probably have that too. My hands always get pale and cold.
Yeah. So that is there's just, I often like to imagine the warmth flowing in. I imagine the blood vessels opening, so allowing more warmth to flow in and relaxing all the muscles. So that is a process that you, through imagination, our imaginations are very powerful, and we can imagine that whole thing going on. Imagine like being in a warm place, putting your hands over a fireplace, feeling soothing, feeling very soothed, as opposed to giving in and thinking, oh, I can't stand it, my hands feel so cold.
Do you need to become certified in biofeedback nowadays, or are the apps on the phone enough?
Well, there are people who specialize in biofeedback, and if this is an area that interests you to work, there are people who are doing neurofeedback, for example, with kids with ADD. You would find somebody who is certified. And certified is always a good idea because it means board certified. It means you've met the highest standards that we have. You've passed an exam. So there are directories. It's bcia.org, I believe, is the Biofeedback Society, and they have a listing of people who are certified. Just as with working with a coach, if you want to work with a health coach, finding a coach, more and more people are becoming board certified. And our school is approved by the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaches. So you would look for, it means our graduates can sit for their exam, and that board certification is the gold standard. Just like working with a functional medicine doctor, you'd find someone who is certified through the Institute for Functional Medicine, and in biofeedback, certified in biofeedback.
Tell us about character strengths and why they're the building blocks for well-being. What exactly is that?
So we focus on what's good. So how this came into being was the people who were the key researchers in positive psychology, Martin Seligman, the late Chris Peterson. They wanted to look at what are these strengths in people. So they looked at the literature, the teachings of philosophy, various religions. They went around the world, looked at different cultures, teachings of psychology. And turns out it all boils down to 24 strengths. They may have different names, but they're these qualities that's the best. And what is the best about the human condition? And so some of these strengths have to do with, they're more of the cognitive strengths. They have to do with wisdom. And others are more of the heart, like love, kindness, forgiveness, strengths that have to, like bravery, creativity, zest, appreciation of beauty and excellence, hope, gratitude, humor, spirituality, leadership, teamwork. So there's 24. And they are like a deck of cards. In other words, we've been dealt all, like picture a deck of cards, and there's 24 in there. We get all of them. These are essential human traits. We all have them. But some are more of our signature strengths. So, for example, my signature strengths happen to be zest and creativity and love of learning, appreciation of beauty and excellence. So when I'm thriving, I'm using those strengths. And I have the others, but I'm not always using them. So every day we use a blend of these strengths. And some we may decide we want to pay more attention to every day, like to say, okay, I am going to, today it's going to be my intention to practice forgiveness. And that's one of the key character strengths that's absolutely tied into physical well-being. So the more you practice forgiveness, that letting go of anger, of holding on, then that's going to affect your physical health at a real deep level. And so that is often paired with the strength of love. Maybe you are angry at somebody, and if you forgive them, maybe you do that by focusing on, well, maybe there are parts of them that you love. What do they do that is kind, for example? And then you can strength spot in others. So maybe you can find kindness in that person. Maybe they're not exhibiting at the moment, but have they in the past? So strengths can be observed in yourself and they can be observed in others. And if you wanted to, so we teach our curriculum is based on character strengths. We work with the VIA Institute of Character, that's VIA, and it's a nonprofit group that studies character strengths. You can go to their website, which is VIA character.org, and you can take an assessment. It's a free test and find out. You get a ranking of those 24 strengths. What's really cool is if you have children, you can give it to your kids. They have a kids version, or we've had people in our school, they'll give it to their partner, their spouses, and we've had companies who have given it to teams, and people will have conversations like, okay, somebody who is their top strength might be prudence, and that's why they're going to act a particular way, whereas somebody else might have a different set of top signature strengths.
As an expert in the psychology of eating, can you share some tips for developing a healthier relationship with food?
Well, we often look at food as macronutrients, micronutrients, and meal plans, food choices. But the psychology of eating, what I have specialized in and taught courses in, is this broader perspective about food and eating habits. And that is, it's kind of like you are what you eat and what you choose to eat. What that means is it's kind of like a window to your personality, to who you are, the foods, how you approach food, your attitude towards food. So some people are more micromanagers, and their approach to food is solely as nutrition. And others are extreme opposite, which would be more of a hedonistic, like I'm just going to eat it because it tastes good. That's my main goal in eating food, for pleasure. And then there are people who are focused on the spiritual aspect. So, for example, they may choose to become a vegan because of their strong beliefs. And the healthiest balance is a blending of all three, where you are conscious of the food as medicine aspect and the nutrients that you're getting. You're also enjoying food, that you're not losing that joy, and also that you may have a sense of awe about where food comes from. And then food can be a window into who we're connected to or not connected to, our families, the early messages. What are your early memories about food? Were you a picky eater? How did your family interact at mealtime? So those early memories, and then habits that we may grown up with. And then that extends to our friends. Well, it's been said we eat what our friends eat, and social pressures that people have. And it's really around holiday time, this can be really front and center, and associations culturally. So these are really something that can be just so strong within us. So if you celebrate Thanksgiving, for example, well, what would happen if one year maybe your family decided, we're going to have, we're going to go to a restaurant, and we're going to have some, we're going to eat Chinese food or Italian food if you're used to turkey and stuffing, and well, it's going to may feel inappropriate. And so you may feel a sense of loss. Like you may we have holidays associated with certain foods and eating patterns. We have Also, nationalities have special foods. Each country has their special foods. And so people take great pride in that. And so it connects to our culture, our ethnicity, and who we want to be. And this goes really deep. I remember a gentleman whose family had a bakery, and they were from Italy, and it was like, third generation bakers, and this wonderful bread that they were baking. And they were it was a first generation immigrant family, and he was going to school, and he said, I would throw away the bread that my mom put in my lunch because I was so embarrassed, and I wanted the white bread that all the other kids were eating. So fitting in, and also kind of shame for our heritage, or pride, all of these emotions get tied in to. So these are some of the complexities that have to do with food. There are gender differences even in how we eat. Age is connected. How, the struggle that, like the rebellious child or the adolescent who goes to college, and maybe they were raised as one way to eat a particular diet, and they're going to come home and announce that now they're vegetarians, or the opposite if they were raised, if they're in that rebellious stage or finding their identity. And as my kids were, they were raised at the time I had been vegan, and so they went off to college and came back and said, oh gosh, that steak that I had was like so yummy, and went out of their way to announce that that was now part of their identity.
I remember that. I remember growing up, I was not allowed to have butter because it was the time of margarine.
Mm.
Yes. So when I finally got my hands on butter, I was like, this is amazing. I don't know how many sticks of butter. It was crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. My kids tell a story like, and often as parents, we're very well-meaning, like, we're not going to have sugar in the house and all natural desserts. And then they go to their friend's house, and my daughter she went crazy. She got sick to her stomach because she had so much of this food that was at her friend's, that she just, she couldn't control it. She was so excited, like, wow, like there's that, food at your friend's house is always better in some way. And but yeah, getting out of the house and making those different choices, and some are positive ones, like and some are more destructive.
So you mentioned earlier about some things that health coaches cannot do, like they can't diagnose. But what exactly can a health coach do with their client, like specifics?
Yeah, so we don't need more experts. And many people will think that this is restrictive, like what they can't do. And the reality is that we're not doing so well out there. People have access to experts. They have access to all this information. So they can go to Google and they can look up, symptoms, and they can read about particular treatments and supplements, and have so much information that's available. And they can go to many, many experts, and they often do. So if somebody's in your audience and they may think, well, I've seen a lot of specialists, and but the change process is hard. It's been said. I just was with Dr. David Perlmutter, who wrote Grain Brain, and he said, most people can't keep a New Year's resolution past like the first week or so. So it's having what a health coach does is help people change when change is hard. They are your ally. They are whatever you want them to be. So the coach doesn't have an agenda. They don't think, okay, I'm a vegan, or I'm keto or paleo, and my mission is to get more people to eat this way. And I'm going to design meal plans for them, and I'm going to help them, tell them, what to eat. But what a health coach does is sit with somebody and they listen. They're there with them. listening. They're like a personal cheerleader. So through that process, when you are being heard and you are supported and you come to that sense that I'm in charge of my health and I'm in charge of deciding where I want to, if I want to change, what, why do I want to change? What do I want to be healthy for? What matters most? A health coach will guide them through asking those kinds of questions. And then they may decide, okay, well, today I'm ready. I think I'm ready to finally, begin an exercise program or sustain one. And then a health coach, okay, well, how are you going to start that? And they're going to say, well, okay, well, maybe, my sneakers are kind of run down. Maybe I need a new pair of sneakers. And then a coach will say, well, okay, that's great. Like, when are you going to do that? Where are you going to get the sneakers? What's your plan? And then how can I, and then at the end of the session, they might say things, okay, now you've told me you're going to go to such a store on Tuesday, to buy the sneakers. Are you still good with that? Let's talk about it. I'm going to ask you the next time we meet, and meeting can be online or live, that we're going to talk about what happened, with buying those sneakers. So it's breaking it down into tiny, tiny steps, and then knowing, and we know this, that when you've committed to this person, your coach, that you're going to follow through. So now it's in your head that, yeah, I'm going to write that down in my calendar, that I'm going to go to that store on Tuesday. I'm going to buy those sneakers because I told my coach that I would do that. And so it's based on that relationship. And that's what's so, so powerful. And so it goes way beyond, having a doctor, having a nutritionist. Those people aren't trained in those behavior change strategies. They're important, and I'm not discounting their value, but that's not what a health coach does.
So you don't need to be in the healthcare field to become a health coach, is what you're saying.
That's right. And that's why they've actually shown that sometimes it even gets in the way. So we have many people who study with us who are practitioners. They might be nutritionists, they have been nurses or doctors, and they're so used to telling people, okay, here's the plan that I worked for you, or this is what I'm finding. They're telling them as opposed to really being with them. And so they have to unlearn that. And so that's why we get so many people who they just have passion to serve, and they're good listeners. And so they don't need to have a background in knowledge of all that content. Now, coaches can educate, and we have many, many great coaches out there who've written books. They're going and giving community talks. They're are doing workshops. So you can give information. It's just that you are not giving personalized treatment recommendations.
So I know regulations for practicing as a health coach can vary greatly by state. What are the most health coach friendly states?
So this is something that changes all the time. And what I like to say is all states are friendly. And what we train at FMCA is that you follow the scope of practice. And what that means is you do not prescribe meal plans. You do not talk about foods that you can eat or not eat for that individual. You do not find a way to order labs and tell them what that lab means, because that's the code of ethics through the National Board of Health and Wellness Coach is saying that. And so, and regulations change. So that kind of question, I could say today and tomorrow it's inaccurate, because so each state, varies a bit. But if you were to call like the Department of Professional Regulations in a particular state to get a clear answer, to know, could be very challenging. And then to keep up with the changes in those regulatory bodies is also, that's going to be a full-time job. So therefore, you stay within the scope of practice so that you know that you're always going to be following the right process.
Do you see any trends to changing the scope of practice for health coaches in the future in more states?
Well, the secret sauce of coaching is the scope of practice. So it's not that we're being restricted, it's quite the opposite. So the value, so there are certain states, for example, where the dietitians are going to be much more vigilant in making sure that they have that territory and no one else, in particularly health coaches, encroaches on it. And you know what? They're correct, because they are licensed. They went to school to learn about those rare nutritional conditions where you have to be aware of. But what is so important is that the mentality is there's room for everybody to play in the sandbox. And when you respect another discipline, so if you're a health coach and you have a client and you're thinking, this is pretty challenging nutritional condition this person has, I'm going to connect with a dietitian, a nutritionist in the area. We're going to work together. I'm going to have them get some advanced nutritional assessment and see what their nutrients are, nutritional status is like. And we're going to collaborate. And then, you know what? Then that nutritionist now is respecting you as a coach and might refer to you. And the same thing, whether you're talking about a medical doctor, other professionals, a psychologist in the area, social worker, it's working together. And that's when I was working as a clinical psychologist. That's why I had a very, very successful practice, because I never really stepped on anyone's toes. I respected what they did and we worked together. And that's when you are working in collaborative care teams in a medical practice, that's what's so special, that you all bring your expertise to the table and you work together in a collaborative fashion, not competing.
Is there anywhere that people can find you online, any information about you? Do you have a website or social media?
Yeah, so it's functionalmedicinecoaching.org. Facebook's Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. You can also find Functional Med Coach on Instagram. I'm Dr. Sandy, and I'm so excited that we also have a new podcast, What the Funk, FUNC.
Amazing. So is there anything else you would like to tell people about your health coaching program?
Well, coaching is a wonderful profession. When you study to be a coach, you are transformed. And so many people come to this field because of their own health challenges. And as they learn coaching, they're applying it in their own lives. So they're enriched. They're helping people get better, helping friends, family. And working with a coach is really a magical experience, because nobody's judging you. Nobody's saddling you with a diagnosis like a mental health, disorder, but really encouraging you, being with you every step of the way to support whatever you want support on.
Awesome. So thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you. It was great to be with you.
Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all the apps that people like to listen with? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to all of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. Anchor's learning curve is virtually none. All you need to do is press a button, start talking, and then distribute to everybody. So if you've always wanted to start your own podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and a diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast, so send it to me. Thank you for listening to the episode. If you made it this far, I'm sure you found some benefit to the hard work that I put into the show. Show your support by subscribing to the podcast. Leave me a voicemail question or email me at thehealthfulgypsy@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Be sure to join the Facebook group. You can find all that information in the show notes and my website, katkatibi.com. This podcast is for informational, merrymakings, and metaphysical purposes only. Statements and views are not medical advice. This podcast, including Kakatibi, disclaim any adverse effects by the use of information you may have heard. Opinions of guests are totally their own. This podcast does not endorse statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications, credibilities, or sanity. Individuals may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to on the podcast. If you think you have a medical problem, consult with a licensed medical physician, not just the spirit of your ancestors while on ayahuasca.